Hey everyone, welcome back to Brianna's Bookshelf. I'm a little bit late, but today is my October wrap-up video. I actually read so many books in October. I'm really happy with the amount that I read. I feel like October is usually the month that I want to read the most because I love everything spooky and scary, and I achieved reading so many books that I was interested in, so I'm super duper happy. I ended up finishing 11 books, and I also had one DNF as well. So I'm going to talk about the books that I read last month from lowest to highest rating. Starting with the book that I DNF'd, did not finish. That was To Flame a Wildflower by Sarah A. Parker. And this is the third book in the, I don't know what the series is called overall, but the first book is To Snap a Silver Stem. I also read the second book during October, and I'll get to that in a minute, but for the third book, I was really just not into it. Unfortunately, I don't think that Sarah A. Parker's writing is really for me. I would consider trying her work again, possibly reading The Moon Hatched. I think that's what her newer book is called that people really seem to like. I would consider reading that, but her writing in this series really did not work for me. I enjoyed the first book, but it steadily went downhill for me from there. The way that it was written made it very difficult for me to understand what was going on and feel any sort of attachment to the story. Going into that third book, I only got maybe I think 30% of the way through. I can't remember exactly. But I just quickly realized I was not going to be enjoying it, and it just didn't feel like it was worth my time. So I just went ahead and gave up and did not finish that series, which I'm perfectly okay with. I'm happy to have had that time back to read some books that I did enjoy more. Then moving on to the books that I did finish, my lowest rating was a 2-star. And the first book that I gave 2 stars was To Snap a Silver Stem. I read this on my Kindle while I was on a flight. I went on vacation at the beginning of October, so I read quite a few books on Kindle during that time. And I was interested in continuing this series. I thought the first one was somewhat interesting. And unfortunately, the second one I didn't like very much. It was a 2-star. I didn't absolutely hate it, but I didn't have that great of a time reading it. Again, just like the third book, the writing really wasn't for me. It was really difficult for me to follow what was going on. I didn't really enjoy the main characters and was really quite confused as to where the story was going and kind of what the point of any of the actions were. And I didn't really feel like I was rooting for anyone, which that's not always a bad thing, I feel like, when you're reading, but especially when I'm reading a fantasy romance, I feel like I really want to care about those characters, so this just was not a very enjoyable read for me, unfortunately. And continuing with some disappointments, my other 2-star book for October was Escaping from Houdini by Kerri Maniscalco. Now, this was quite a disappointment to me, unfortunately, because this is the third book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, and the first 2 books I absolutely loved and gave 5 stars. So to give this one 2 stars was quite a decrease in enjoyment, unfortunately, but I can clearly see what about this I did not enjoy as much. So this series is following Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell, and Audrey Rose, our main character, she is an apprentice to her uncle who works in mortuary sciences, and these books take place in the late 1800s, so it is, of course, very unusual for a woman to be studying mortuary sciences in this time. So Audrey Rose is our feminist queen, doing what she loves and wanting to study cadavers.
Girl, what the fuck is you talking about?
And I love her for that. And Thomas Cresswell is also studying under her uncle, and the two of them team up to hunt for Jack the Ripper in the first book. And from there, they make quite the duo, so they continue to investigate different murders and do these autopsies together and form a bit of a relationship as well. So it's a really fun, murder mystery, slightly horror, historical, and romance. There's a lot going on in these books. But in this one, we were following the same cast of characters as they were on a ship, and this ship had a circus that was taking place each night as their entertainment. So I love circus and carnival stuff, so this was even stranger for me to give it such a low rating. But in the book, due to the circumstances of the plot, Audrey and Thomas spent quite a bit more time apart, and they did not work as closely together on this case. And that really detracted from my enjoyment because their banter is like definitely my favorite thing about the series. And so having them be separated and at times having conflict was not really enjoyable for me to read. There was also other characters introduced in this book that I just really did not enjoy, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And the killings themselves even seemed quite formulaic. Like I could tell each time like when they were about to discover a body, so that kind of thriller suspense was taken away as well. I am going to continue this series. I do have the last book and I'm hoping it'll go up a little bit from here because I still love these characters. I still love these stories. This book just was not it compared to the other two. Then moving on to my 2.5 stars. Kind of had a lot of half-star ratings this month, which is interesting. I guess just since I read more books, I don't know, I was feeling indecisive in my ratings, I guess. But for my first 2.5 star book, I have A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. And this is a young adult dark academia novel. And I love dark academia, so I was very interested in this. And unfortunately, it fell a little bit short of my expectations, but I did still enjoy it. So in this book, we're following Felicity, who is a student at an all-girls boarding school. And she's quite an interesting character. She previously had her girlfriend die and she had to leave school for a while, and then in this start of this book she's returning to school and she has a new housemate in her dorm who is this 17-year-old girl who has previously written like a best-selling novel and now is coming to this school to help her write her next big novel because she wants to write about this series of women who were speculated to be witches that were involved with the founding of this school. It's like this whole history and I guess kind of town gossip to do with this school. There were definitely some very spooky gothic vibes in this book. I really enjoyed the description of the school, of the dorm that they lived in, of the landscape surrounding their school. However, I really did not enjoy this character, Ellis, who was the writer who attended school, and from the very beginning I was just like kind of rolling my eyes, I guess, at the fact that this like 17-year-old girl is a famous author and had to come to this school in order to write her next book. Like it just felt very unbelievable, and of course it's a fiction book, like there are going to be things that are unbelievable and sometimes that's perfectly okay, but in this book I just couldn't quite get over that aspect, and the whole time it really affected my enjoyment of the book. And there's also some sections of this book that were a little bit confusing to me, kind of like what the point or significance of past events were compared to the events happening in the present time of the book. And yeah, it just like wasn't my favorite. I feel like the plot was not entirely executed in the way it could have been. But again, I really enjoyed the gothic atmosphere and the dark academia, so it still was somewhat enjoyable for me to read. Then my second 2.5 star rating was Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. And this is one that I read on Kindle Unlimited. And I would say, again, this is one that was somewhat enjoyable, but not one I really loved or anything like that. This is, I believe, based on like Russian or some sort of Eastern European mythology. And we're following this group of sisters who are witches. And their dad is like this witch or wizard, I guess, who is kind of like the most powerful remaining one in their town and their region. And he's super controlling. He keeps all 3 daughters basically locked away at home, and they are only allowed to do these like different witch services for the community in order for the father to make money. And he has this curse that's been placed upon him where he is basically eternally hungry. So they need a lot of money to keep feeding him. And we're following one of the daughters in particular, who her gift is that she can like see things that people are thinking or memories that they have by touching them. And this was very whimsical. Like there were monsters and like gnome type creatures, different things that lived in their house and in their yard. Very whimsical, very magical, with this kind of darker gothic vibe. However, I just didn't quite connect with the characters or the story. Again, I had like an somewhat enjoyable time while reading it, but I kind of could have taken it or left it. I didn't feel that excited about it. So unfortunately, I think I have to give it 2.5 stars. Moving up to my 3-star reads. First is Frankenstein by Junji Ito. So this is actually a story collection by Junji Ito. So the first story in this collection is Junji Ito's adaptation of Frankenstein, which I really, really enjoyed. I've actually never read Frankenstein. However, I did pick it up this month, so hopefully I will be reading it soon, which is very exciting. But of course, I know the general gist of the story, and I've read several books that were inspired by Frankenstein. So I thought this was quite an interesting depiction of it, being able to see the visuals, the illustrations of what Frankenstein's monster looked like. It was quite enjoyable for me. And then the rest of the stories in this book were on different topics, kind of all following this one character. So it's like kind of a reoccurring theme within it, a reoccurring character, and different things that were going on with him that were kind of supernatural. And unfortunately, I was not that into those stories. They kind of fell flat compared to other things that I have read by Junji Ito, and I just did not love them. So I just kind of rounded it to a 3-star because I loved the Frankenstein, but not the rest. And honestly, I'm glad that I did end up getting this from the library, because I don't think that this is one that I would want to reread. So better to not have bought this and just to have taken out from the library for a little bit. Then my second 3-star read of October was Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio. Now, M.L. Rio wrote If We Were Villains, which is an extremely popular dark academia book, super beloved. I really enjoyed reading that book. So I think a lot of people had been very expectant of what M.L. Rio would write next. And they did release this novella, I believe, last year. And I just now got around to it this fall. I was super interested in the premise, which is basically that there's this group of kind of like ragtag friends or acquaintances who all have insomnia or reasons that they need to be awake at night. And they all meet every night in this cemetery on a college campus in order to smoke. And then they kind of have this mystery that goes from there. And I will say that that premise really got me excited. And I think that the book did deliver on that, because the very first scene in the book is all these people slowly trickling in to the cemetery, meeting up with one another, smoking their cigarettes, talking, and just kind of it is going into the ambiance of the cemetery itself. And I absolutely loved that scene. I thought it was so good. I was having such a good time reading that in the beginning. It's very creepy. It's like this old cemetery. All these different characters are very unique and interesting, have their own things going on. Many of them were insomniacs, so it's discussing like the reasons they couldn't sleep and kind of what the feeling of sleep deprivation feels like, and how that can kind of alter your state of consciousness and make things appear kind of hazy or just strange, and yeah, just alter your consciousness, I guess, which I thought was a very interesting topic to discuss, and also to bring into this kind of gothic and scary atmosphere. It really lent a lot to, I guess, the tension of these characters. And then we do get introduced into this mystery of they find a new grave that's been dug open, and they're trying to figure out what is going on. So from there, they kind of split up into different groups, and the rest of the novella is just the characters trying to figure out what's happening, who did this, and yeah, just kind of trying to come to a conclusion. And from there, I felt like the writing was not quite as strong, in my opinion, and I did not love the direction it went in. I thought it was kind of interesting, but ultimately the way it was done started to lose me a little bit. I still enjoyed it overall, but yeah, unfortunately I wasn't able to give it a higher rating because the second half was just not as strong to me as the first half. But again, I really love that first scene, and I think that this is worth a read if you are interested in reading like a spooky atmosphere. I'd highly recommend reading this just even for that first scene in the cemetery. I thought was incredible. Then a book that I rated 3.5 stars was Belladonna by Adalyn Grace. I've been wanting to read this for a super long time. This is a kind of gothic fantasy romance and it is young adult. And I know the series is super popular and I believe at this point it is finished. So I decided to read this when it got added to Kindle Unlimited and I enjoyed it quite a bit. In this, we're following a girl who since childhood has been able to see basically the Grim Reaper, but she calls him Death. And yeah, she can like see his physical embodiment, but no one else can. And so when people around her die, she can literally see him coming to get them. And a lot of people around her have passed away. So she is no longer with her parents. She's been passed basically from relative to relative, been in some not so great living situations and with some not so great guardians. When Death comes again to take one of her relatives, she actually speaks to him more and starts to wonder, why can I see him? Why can I engage with him? And he becomes more interested in her as well. He's, she's the only human that can see him that's not actively dying. He becomes quite interested in her and she starts to basically fool Death by taking poisonous belladonna berries and eating them, and she realizes like she cannot die from this. She can't be poisoned at least. And so she'll get basically to the verge of death and Death will have to be summoned to her and she can then talk to him. They can keep each other company until she recovers from the poisoning. So a very, very interesting premise. And she ends up going to live with a new group of relatives, which are much better. And they have this big manor house and she's getting to know the brother and sister that already live there. And also is potentially interested in making her like debutante debut and looking for potential suitors. And at the same time, there's a mystery going on where, of course, members of this household are starting to become ill and die. And our main character, she basically teams up with Death to try to figure out what is going on. And this is also at its core a romance. The romance is, of course, with Death. I mean, who else would it be with? And it is young adult, so it's very like chaste and wholesome, but it was really cute and I enjoyed it a lot. I had a good time while reading it and I would definitely consider reading further and seeing if I enjoy the rest of the books in the series. Moving on to my 4-star reads, I had a few of these this month. The first being The Staircase in the Woods by Chuck Wendig. Now, this was a pretty fun horror to start with that definitely had more depth than I was expecting, so we love to see that. The premise of this book is that we're following this group of friends, and when they were in high school, they were camping and a staircase appeared in the woods that like didn't seem to lead to anything. And in case you didn't know, this is the subject of kind of like a creepypasta like online kind of phenomenon that was popular in maybe like the earlier 2000s. And so I was quite interested to see what Chuck Wendig would do with this idea. And so yes, previously they saw a staircase appear and one of their friends went up it and went missing. In the present day, we are once again following this group of friends as one of them is experiencing a tragic event, and so they all come together to kind of like say goodbye to this friend. He's ill, and this actually brings up again the mystery of the staircase and where it led and what happened to their other friend. And I think that the way that Chuck did the whole staircase thing was super interesting. He definitely dove into like where the staircases go and created a whole nother aspect of the lore that I personally had never read in like a creepypasta or anything like that before. So I feel like he really did a good job on expanding on that idea and making it its own thing. And like I said, this got a lot more meaningful than I was expecting as well. Each of these characters had various difficulties and traumas in their lives, starting from when they were teenagers, many things that they hid from one another that they didn't know how to deal with, and these things are coming to the surface and they're having to address them later in life as they're meeting together again. And yeah, so they're dealing with all these different issues, and it deals a lot with mental health as well, and I really appreciated all those things, all the topics that it addressed. It had some really great commentary, and the atmosphere was quite spooky as well. Then I finally finished Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir and gave this 4 stars. So I've been reading this for a super long time. I want to say that I started reading it in August, maybe even July. I can't remember at this point. But my friend was trying to get me to read it, and we were on a road trip together. So she started playing the audiobook over the speakers while we were driving, and I got super sucked into it that way. I am really not an audiobook girly. I just cannot focus on them. But the audiobook for Project Hail Mary is so good. It actually really captured my attention, and that was the perfect setting for me to get into it on a road trip when we didn't really have much else to do. So I was really enjoying my experience listening to it. I had not the best experience listening to it after that, unfortunately. I was talking about this on Goodreads before, but basically once I got home, I tried to continue listening, and there was such weird stuff going on with Spotify. That was where I was listening to it. Spotify took it down, and I couldn't find it, and then they added it back, and so I started listening again, and then it got taken down again, and then it got added back, and
Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap.
and then I ran out of listing credits, and it was a whole thing. So that's why it's just taken me so long to read it. Otherwise I would have blown through it faster, I'm sure, because I was really enjoying it. But in case you don't know what this book is about, this is super popular. I feel like so many people on BookTube have read this, and it's totally outside of my comfort zone because it is science fiction, and we're following our main character who is sent to space on a mission, and he basically wakes up from his coma with no memories of basically anything that have led him here, and he needs to figure out what the mission is, how to complete it, why he's being sent on this mission, and he is completely alone in space, so he's trying to figure out how to do all of this by himself. And yeah, this was just so different than what I expected, so amazing, and was a lot more fun and joyful than I expected as well. I know that they're going to be making this into a movie, I believe, in 2026, and I cannot wait to see it. Yeah, I don't know how they're going to pull off the different aspects of it, but I think it's going to be really good. During the month of October, I co-hosted the Haunted Library Bingo event alongside Angel and Brooklyn, and I will link their channels below. And for our bingo, we were buddy reading Salem's Lot together. So this was one of our prompts on our bingo board, and we also hosted some reading sprints and a live show discussing this book. So this was one that I was kind of reading slowly throughout the whole month of October, and I did annotate this and take lots of notes, so this was a really fun read. And this is actually my second time reading this book. I read it, I believe, 3 years ago, and at that point I enjoyed it. I gave it a 3-star, but I will say that my rereading experience made me appreciate this book even more, and so this time I did give it 4 stars. It was a great experience to read this with Angel and Brooklyn because it was so fun to have people to talk to about it and share our different favorite parts of the book. And in this book, we are following Ben, who returns to the town of Jerusalem's Lot, also known as Salem's Lot. He grew up there, but he returns later in life to write a book, and his book is loosely inspired by the Marston House, which is kind of this local haunted house kind of legend that sits up on the hill, and that everyone is basically scared of this house. And from there, it goes into some scary directions that, if you don't know a lot about this book, you may not know what the tropes are, so I'm not going to mention that. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but yeah, I think this is a really good one. In true Stephen King fashion, there are a lot of tangents in this book. He does go through the perspectives of basically every single person that lives in this town, so it is quite long. That's actually one of the things that I really appreciated on my reread that I didn't care for so much in my first read, is revisiting these characters. I could really appreciate the different perspectives of all of them and how it changed the narrative to be kind of focused on the town itself as one entity rather than any one single character. So while there definitely are like main characters in this book, I will say that this is at its core a story about the town of Salem's Lot as a whole and like what is terrorizing it and what happens to it. And then last but not least, my last 4-star was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is my first Robin Hobb book, and this is the first in a trilogy. And I've been reading this over the period of a few months, like reading it super slowly, and I did really enjoy that experience of not rushing it because I think this is quite a slower fantasy read. There's no romance, it's like very classic fantasy, and we are following our main character Fitz, who is the bastard son of a king in waiting in this kingdom. And he gets sent to live in the kingdom, and we're really just following his whole life from the beginning of this book. He is a young child, and we follow him growing up in this kingdom until he reaches like young adulthood. And we follow, just his life, I guess, like the different training he goes through, like what he becomes, how, like what his importance to this kingdom is. And I feel like that's so vague and sounds kind of boring, I guess, but I thought it was really good. It was wonderful in this like really slowly developed way where we were getting like this master plan of the story over such a long period of time. And this is a trilogy, so I'm quite interested to read the next 2 books and see where those take us, because now we've really gotten the layout in this book of how Fitz is trained to become an assassin and his whole basically like story of his childhood and young adult years. So I'm very interested to see where we go from here. So those were all the books that I read in October. I read so many good ones that I'm excited about. Unfortunately, no 5 stars, but hey, hopefully in November we'll get a new 5-star read. And thank you so much everyone for watching. I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.